Hi there, and welcome to yet another installment of What the Fuck is Going On. This time, it's not one big thing that caused me to pick up the camera. There's not anything really major, but there's a lot, and really a lot of small stuff happening. We have stuff in the US that doesn't bode too well, or might bode very well, we don't know. We have stuff happening in Europe that seems okay, but it could also go just straight down the drain. We have things happening in Turkey as well, also a bit iffy. There aren't really an upside to those in Turkey as it seems right now, but who knows. But let's start out with the US because, well, it's always the US, isn't it? Anyways, Trump is doing what he's doing. He's starting to try and tear down everything, undermine democracy, getting himself elected dictator for life, and all that jazz. Yeah, the orange turd is doing what he's been doing all the time. But there's stuff happening in the Democratic Party, which seems to either bode very well for the future or things are going to turn out a real giant mess. Now, the Democratic Party is interesting for us in Europe because they are the only ones in place to potentially inhibit the narcissistic tendencies of the Orange King, wannabe king. Whatever he does can, in reality or in theory, be checked by the Parliament. That means House of Representatives and the Senate, but that will require a majority in those places. Right now, the judicial branch is trying to keep it in check, but they don't really have any way of enforcing their rulings. Normally, a government would do what the judicial system tells them to do. If they're told you can't do this, well, then they're not gonna. They've done it, and then they're told off, and then they'll stop doing it. That doesn't seem to be the case here. But if Parliament says this is illegal, then there are enforcement mechanisms in place. They can remove Trump from the job, for instance, and any of his ministers could be removed as well, quite easily by majority in the Parliament. But that requires a united Parliament. Well, not all of them, but a majority of them have to stand together and enforce their will. Which is a problem because, well, right now, the Republicans have a majority in both houses. But they're very small majorities. So if just a few people cross the line, or they don't even cross to the other party, just need to cooperate with them in a few cases, then they can check the power of the wannabe king. If, and that's a huge if, the Democrats stand united with one another. And they've done so far. But a few days ago, we had this entire mess. Might be a week ago now. Anyways, where the Republicans had put together a budget that they could operate under for the next year or so, and that passed easily through the House of Representatives, and then it headed to the Senate. The Senate has this weird rule with the where a minority can block a decision, and this block can only be lifted if you have 60% of the votes. It started out by just being someone standing on the floor and talking until time would run out. But now you just need to declare that I'm going to block this, and then the other side has to raise a majority of 2/3 to pass things. Well, not quite 2/3, it's 60% if I remember correctly. Anyways, that's called the filibuster. And the Democrats could have used the filibuster to block this budget. Then the small majority in the Senate, the small majority of Republicans couldn't pass the budget because they wouldn't have enough votes. But the old leadership, and I do mean old, decided to not use a filibuster to block this. So now the Republicans can pass the budget with their ordinary majority, just 50%, and that's it. And this hasn't been sitting too well with a lot of voters, and it hasn't been sitting too well with I tend to say, younger part of the Democratic Party, but that's not really true, because you also have someone like Bernie Sanders who's definitely not a fan of this, and he's not exactly young. That would be stretching reality a bit more than it can actually take. And this matters because young people like AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, are holding, it's not really these meetings, the ordinary meetings between the voters and the politicians, because there you would do it in your own electorate. You would face your own electorate and tell them how things are going back and forth. But that's not what's happening. She's traveling everywhere, and so is Bernie Sanders, by the way, and a lot of the other young people, which makes things this odd, because Bernie Sanders, again, isn't young, but he's acting alongside the young people. They're having these meetings all over the US, and they're going for full house. They fill up stadiums one after the other with dissatisfied voters. And whenever you have these meetings between Republicans and their electorate, the Republicans are getting chewed out. Really, there's so many videos out there by now of them being chewed out by the electorate. What's happening right now is definitely not popular. Which means that there would be a lot of support if the Democrats blocked what's happening, and they decided not to. The reason is very likely that the usual play in this case is to let the governing party run out the line, cause a whole lot of mess, and then face the music at the next election. If there's going to be a next election in this case, we can't be entirely sure. But that's because you would be unpopular if you caused a lot of damage by blocking a budget. But in this case, the budget is going to cause a lot of damage, so you probably wouldn't get. And that's what the young ones, or the left-leaning ones, or whatever you want to call them, are banking on, that they could block this budget and the blame would still fall squarely on the Republicans, and they are very likely right. But the leadership does what they've always done, banking on the next election. That seems to be a bit of a miscalculation in this place, and this might split the Democratic Party. You have a huge part that want to go aggressive in your face on what's happening right now and get a lot of support in that way, and you have a part that wants to let shit hit the roof, the fan, whatever, go everywhere, and then use the outrage of that in the next election. Again, they're banking on the next election being free and fair, and knowing how Trump and the Republicans operate, that's quite unlikely, which the left-leaning young ones know. So we have a potential split in the Democratic Party, which means they won't stand together and confront what's happening as one unit, which means that even if a few Republicans were willing to cross over and do what's right, and that's iffy because they're really, really afraid of Trump and Musk. They don't want to be primaried by Trump and his MAGA people, and then have the primary opponent supported by Musk and his money. So they're really afraid, and it's unlikely that any would cross over right now. But again, that might happen, but that would only be of use if we have a united Democratic Party, which we probably don't have right now. So that's a mess. Surprise, surprise, what's happening in the US is a mess. We also have a potential mess in Europe. Friedrich Merz, the incoming Chancellor of Germany, has a big plan for rearming Germany. Yeah, that doesn't sound well, but in this case, rearming Germany is a good idea, because Germany is a through and through democratic state, so they aren't dangerous for other democracies, but they would definitely be a problem for a country like, let's say, I don't know, Russia. But rearming this big plan requires a lot of money, and it's not enough that the EU has a lot of plans for rearming, a very big plan, but Germany also needs their own. And Friedrich Merz has a plan to the tune of a couple of €100 million, but he needs to borrow that money. And in Germany, they have a debt brake, they call it. It's a ceiling for how much the German government can borrow, and it's built into the constitution, so you can't just change it because you feel like it. you need a fairly sizable majority. You need 2/3 of the majority in the parliament to change this. And the new parliament, well, in that parliament, the upcoming government won't have 2/3. They will have a majority, but not 2/3. But with their coalition partners, they do have a 2/3 majority in the sitting parliament. So in the interim between the election and the new government, the new parliament taking their seats, they will have the 2/3 majority to change this debt ceiling. And they've done so. And Merz is on the way with his plan. There's just one tiny hiccup here. That's that the AfD and Die Linke, the extreme left party in Germany, neither of them want this rearming. Not necessarily because they're peaceniks. A lot of the people in Die Linke are, but the AfD definitely isn't. But they're pro-Russia well, the majority of them are pro-Russia, and they don't want any kind of confrontation with Russia, don't want to be in opposition to Russia. So they don't want this. And AfD has made the case in front of a constitutional court that this interim parliament shouldn't be able to make decisions like the one Friedrich Merz has got them to make. Merz, on the other hand, says, of course, parliament is the ones who make decisions, and you can't have a period of time where parliament can't make decisions. That won't work. So that's now in the hands of the Constitutional Court, and we don't know exactly which way they're going to fall. It's most likely that they're going to be supporting Merz and let this pass through, but they could side with the AfD, and then Merz doesn't have the money to carry on with his plans. So probably going to be okay, and everything is in place, but there is this minor hiccup with the Constitutional Court. Then we have, well, a revolutionary sentiment in some countries in Europe. The government in Serbia just stepped back due to demonstrations. We don't know if there are going to be new elections or if just a new government is going to be formed with the existing majorities in the parliament, but something is going to happen because they have stepped back. The current government has been a bit wishy-washy. They want to get closer to the EU, which the people like that. But they've also been cozying up a lot to Russia, and that's caused a lot of tension. So, well, that's been resolved, and then we'll see how it falls out. Then we have a lot of demonstrations in Hungary, and we also have some in Slovakia, because neither Orban nor Fico are very popular, but it's unlikely right now that they're going to step down, but elections aren't that far away, so it doesn't bode too well for them. And then we have Turkey. Turkey is a small part of it is in Europe, and the majority is in Asia. But the part that's interesting right now is actually the part that's sitting right on the border. That would be Istanbul, one of the biggest cities in Turkey. And the mayor of Istanbul is probably Erdogan's, the current Turkish president's main political opponent, the one who has the best chance of beating him at an election. And Erdogan just had him arrested. Don't know exactly why, but he's been arrested with a lot of people around him. And this is causing uproar because all the supporters behind this mayor, well, they claim that this is unfounded. And the government so far hasn't been able to say that there is a good reason for doing what they're doing, which makes the entire thing kind of sketchy. And it does seem a lot like Erdogan is getting rid of a political opponent, and he's been known to pull stuff like this because, let's face it, he isn't exactly a Democrat at heart. There's a reason they call him the Sultan. But then again, the Turks are Democrats, so there are limits to how far you can push them, and they are in an uproar right now. On the other hand, the Turks have a tendency to fall down very, very quickly again. Just forget about it if it turns out that there's a good reason. It seems quite reasonable, really. They get mad when there's something to get mad about, and then they cool down rather quickly if they are told that there's a good reason and what that reason is. But How this falls out remains to be seen because we haven't been given a reason yet. And Turkey is important because it's one of the major military powers in NATO, and they are one of the potential main opponents to Russia because they definitely do not like the idea of Russia controlling the entire Black Sea. And, well, getting back to their Soviet borders isn't very attractive to Turkey. There's a reason Turkey joined the NATO in the first place. So, yeah, we need that to fall in place, and alongside the democratic states of Europe and stuff like that. So a messy situation isn't exactly optimal, but then again, there might be a good reason, or, well, if there isn't, it might cause Erdogan to be replaced rather quickly. So we'll see what comes of that. And, well, there's a lot of other stuff, but I think that was the main things right now. So as soon as there's something else, I'll pick up the camera again, and then hopefully I'll see you then.